I have a very special friend in my life that I have known for over 30 years. I know that I can trust her with sharing anything in my life because I've already been able to do that with her. And there have been times in my life where I have needed drastic help, and she is the one person that I know for sure will be there immediately because she's done it for me in the past.
And I believe in order to establish and maintain a friendship that can last, it requires vulnerability. And it takes time and effort on both ends. Keyword time. It requires difficult conversations and being exposed.
When I was, in the hospital and being super private about my, daughter's birth because it wasn't how I wanted it to be, and it just wasn't ideal. And I kind of did the whole I don't really want anyone to come. And my friend, this particular person, said, okay, well, I'm not anyone, so I'm coming with a bunch of things that you need. She was a preemie, and she brought me all these preemie clothes for her to fit into. She brought me a ton of lactation things that I didn't even know existed. She brought me just bras, things that you just don't, it's just personal things that I never had. I've never been pregnant before. That was my first time.
But you never know who you really think is somebody got your back and somebody that a family to you until you go through a situation and the first person comes to your mind is that the person that you should pursue to get you out of misery or out of crisis, or if you need somebody to get you back.
I had a friend who I was really close to for years. I could say that I fully trusted him. I ended up going through one of the hardest things I've ever had to face. And he decided he couldn't go there with me. I know it hurt both of us immensely. And our friendship ended up dissolving. It's never been the same. And after that, something shifted in me.
Welcome to Big Talk Little Greek. My name is Alia Bogdanoff, and today we're talking about what it means to be fully known by others. As you heard in the intro, we asked several people to reflect on whether or not they had someone in their life who knows who they are and they can fully rely on. We also asked what that meant to them. My guest today, DJ Criner, aka David Criner, aka David Joseph Lee Criner, and I talk about what that means. He joins me in a vulnerable conversation about being truly known and the struggle of allowing people to be close to us and ultimately letting them into our inner circle of trust. Before we start that, I do want to give a little side note to the recording. About 10 minutes before I began setting up my equipment, a transformer that PG&E was working on down the street blew when we were left in the dark, without power, and basically alone. Determined not to have to reschedule babysitters, ask my husband to bring me again, we decided to press on and record off my phone. Thankfully, DJ projects his voice well in his industry, and I'm a natural Greek loudmouth. In regards to the coronavirus, there was no hugging, shaking of hands, lots of hand washing, and lots of precautions were taken in this recording. So, sit back, relax, try to maintain a little bit of your sanity during this lockdown, and enjoy an episode with DJ Criner.
Thanks so much for allowing me to be on with you. DJ Criner, as you said, I serve as the senior pastor of St. Rest Baptist Church, very historical church in Southwest Fresno. We've existed for about 76 years. It'll be 77 this year.
Oh, wow.
I've been the pastor for 6 years, 7 years this July. Before that, I was interim for a year and a half when my pastor, Pastor Shane Scott, left. And then before that, I was a youth and young adult pastor for about 6 years itself. I have an amazing, beautiful wife, Jessica, who serves as clinical therapist for the county. And then I have 3 very expensive daughters, Faith, Giselle, and Riley, who are the loves of my life and the reason why I keep pushing and moving through. So I think I'm just an all-around kind of simple, humble guy, and the pastor is what everybody knows, but a lot of people don't know the true person that I really am behind everything.
Now let's give a little bit of background about how you and I know each other. So we met each other at Fresno Pacific University. We were both going through our business degree completion program. And did I come in and just sit next to you?
No, I came and sat next to you.
You came and sat next to me. Okay, so you came in and sat next to me because we could basically choose our seats.
Right.
And tell me, let's talk a little bit about our first interactions that we had.
Okay, so I remember this like it was yesterday. I walked in the classroom. We had a large class, right? It was like the first day. And I didn't go to the orientation. So a lot of people had kind of met each other during orientation, and I did not. So I walked in. I think I was the last one to walk in. Mm-hmm. And I'm a real small guy.
Yeah,
so
you're
I'm real skinny.
Tiny.
Yeah, super skinny. And so I needed to sit with someone that was not intimidating. And there was this little girl who had glasses and was just like smiling so big. And I'm looking around at everyone else. Everyone else just looked mean as I don't know what. And we're at a Christian university with people who are mean as I don't know what. So I was like, I'm going to pick the Christian girl that is smiling. And I sat by and you were like, hi, I'm Leah. And I was like, oh yeah, this is my baby sister from here on out. Yes. And from then on, like I adopted you as my baby sister.
That's so true.
And we've been like tight since then, even though when we graduated, you forgot about me.
I did not forget about you.
It's all right.
You have a more important life
than I do. It's fine. I'll let that go.
Well, I think the funny part I think about our interaction and our relationship back in school was that, I mean, I didn't know who you were.
Right.
I didn't know, you said you were a pastor of a church. I mean, that's fine. I just knew you as DJ.
Yeah.
And I think my favorite thing about you is we used to make fun of people, which just to this day cracks me up that we had people that we would joke about, especially some of the teachers.
Right.
Because it was just, it was such a stressful time for both of us.
Absolutely.
We're trying to work full time, go get through school. Right. I mean, it brings up every insecurity you have when you go back to school and you're trying to finish. So you were just this solid rock for me.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, we've always just known each other that way. Yeah. And so through the years, after school ended, we've had some conversations just about relationships. And one thing that came up a while ago, I think it was about a year and a half ago, I was still working at FPU, and we were talking about people knowing who we really are. Right. Which I would say is kind of a tender subject for me because I'm a performer with my personality.
This is true.
Because it's true. And I learned from when we did our personality in the class, I forgot what it's called, Myers-Briggs.
Right.
We're both ENFJs,
That's
which
right.
are like, what is that? Extroverted, judgment, feelings. I forgot the last one.
Well, me too. We graduated.
Instinctual or something. So we basically have a very similar personality coming out of two very different looking people.
Right.
I'm a small Greek person.
Very. I'm a skinny black dude.
But you basically eclipse me. And
this is true.
when you hug me, I see nothing else. It's just, you envelop me. And I love that about you. So we had this talk about a year and a half ago about how you don't think people really know who you are.
Right.
And I really related to that on a very different scale, because when you're a performer, you don't necessarily let people see what's there. You give them what they want to see. Because the first thing you want to do is, you want to make people comfortable. You want people to maybe understand what it means to relate to you. But usually it's all for the other person.
Right.
And we tend to forget ourselves a little
Absolutely.
bit. And also when you are a giving personality and you see things beyond what people give in the front, right? You tend to just do it for them.
Right.
So I wanted to get to know you. Well, I know you, but I wanted other people to get to know you a little bit.
Okay.
About who you really are.
I appreciate that, man.
So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your upbringing?
Oh, my goodness gracious. You know, I'm old, so I have to like really think back. I mean, I'm 36 now, so that was like so long ago. My upbringing was interesting. I was born in Stockton, California, which is, north of here. And in Stockton, I was born on a very rough side of town. So it kind of resembled West Fresno, but probably on a smaller scale.
Okay.
West Fresno is kind of a tale of two cities, right? So West Fresno is a large engulfing of African American, Hispanic. But where I came from in Stockton, I was born on the south side, Nightingale. And all around you were gangs, drugs, single parent homes, basically kind of run down homes on the tail end of our street, but in the middle, kind of the hub, were older individuals, older black families. It was a very tight community because that's really all we had. So we didn't have. I think like the greatest thing we had was a supermarket that was down the street, Big Value, and there was no value in the supermarket whatsoever. and I remember we had this drugstore that sold like the prescriptions for all the elderly in the community, and it was so tight because you can go to the drugstore and you can say, "Hey, Grandma needs this," and Doug, who was the owner of it, just put it on her tab, which we don't hear anything about nowadays. Oh no, that never
happens anymore.
But we grew up in a very close knit family. It was 5 kids. My mother and my father. My grandmother lived directly across the street, my grandmother and my grandfather. And we grew up basically between 2 homes. We would play hide and go seek, tag, kickball, stickball. And
where are you in that lineup?
Oh, I'm the second oldest. So
okay.
Biologically, it's me and my sister, Dominique.
Okay.
I'm the oldest biological kid. And then my mother and my father adopted 3 kids.
Oh,
the first
really?
child was adopted when I was 1 year old, my older sister, Vanessa.
Wow.
And then my brother, who passed 2 years ago, he's 20 days younger than me. That's my foster brother. My mother and my father took in at 3 years when I was 3 years old, and they adopted when I was 7.
So were these foster to adopt? Is that what they were doing? Okay.
At that time, it was just emergency placement. Like the whole ideology of adoption while fostering didn't even come up into the equation because they were... Back then, the Department of Social Services was so big on making sure they do reconciliation, so reunification with parent and kid. But I mean, my brother and my sister's biological parents were so connected and so hooked on drugs that my mother and my father fought. My father was a correctional officer and my mother was the director of these large choirs that was very well known. Yeah. So DSS was like, we need to permanently place these kids in your home. Right. So by the time we were 7 years old, we didn't even know that they were our foster brothers and sisters. Wow. Until my mother broke the news to us. Yeah. Because she wanted us to grow up just not seeing them any different. Right. And then my father and my mother separated when I was 11 years old after we had moved into a big, huge home together. Yeah. 3 years later, they separated. And that kind of started that downward spiral of my life that probably lasted and is still kind of lasting. Like you talk about that whole performance thing was something I had to put on, even as a kid.
Yeah, and I myself come from a broken home. I mean,
you see what I'm saying?
My parents divorced when I was 3.
Oh, seriously?
So I didn't really know what a real family looked like together. Right. And you talk about the performance thing. I think what really comes in with that is that when you don't have something secure to attach to, you look for ways to find attachment, and it doesn't have to be necessarily real. It just has to be safe. And so what I found myself doing was finding safe attachments on my terms.
What do you mean?
Well, okay, so you make a friend, and you're like, I want this friend to stick around. Right. That's my main goal. Okay. Is not being abandoned. Okay. So what am I going to do to ensure that I'm not abandoned? Well, I'm going to mirror, which means you act like them. Try to create this environment where they feel safe. And then I'm going to make sure that I agree with them on everything so there's no discord. And I'm always going to make sure along the road that they don't have an opportunity to not like the relationship.
Because you don't want them to walk away.
Because you don't want them to walk away. That's where main goals of survival come in.
See, I was the total opposite.
What do you mean?
So I got to the point where I didn't want people around. Like I refused to get so close to people because I felt if I get too close, they're going to do exactly what my father did.
Yeah.
And they're going to abandon and walk away from me. So
Right.
I started taking on this mindset of being the hero. I have to fix it. So I became the fixer of my family.
Wow.
And even to this day, my wife tells me all the time, you try to fix everything because
Yeah.
I don't like discourse. I
Right.
love peace.
Yeah.
I get nervous whenever there is a possibility of disconnection.
Yeah.
And so I took on this image or this mindset of being, at that time, there was this cartoon character called Darkwing Duck.
Yeah.
And he was always coming in to save the day,
I know who
right?
you're
But he
talking
was
about, yeah.
kind of a bumbly, clumsy kind of guy because
Yeah.
he really didn't know how to do it.
Right.
He just figured it has to be fixed.
Right.
So I became the Darkwing Duck of my family. And
Yeah.
even to this day with church, I'm always trying to fix stuff because I hate people to be separate.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about a personality like that is you have the good side, right? I relate to that a lot. I used to call myself the glue, holding everything together. You have the good side, which is the people skills, the ability to read people,
Right.
the ability to bring people together. But then you have this bad side, which is the codependence.
Absolutely.
And the anxiety that comes along with it.
Oh, man, the anxiety is nothing to mess with.
Yeah.
Anxiety, panic attacks, the insomnia,
Yeah.
because your mind never shuts off.
Right.
Because you have yet to have anyone help you fix the things that occurred in your life.
Oh, yeah. They
because
just get put
you're always
aside.
the fixer.
Yeah,
right?
you're always a fixer.
Absolutely.
And identity becomes about what you can do for others, rather who you are. I don't think I learned how to relate to people on a real basis until probably about 3 years ago.
I'm still not able to relate to people. I'm really
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
Because everyone sees you for the performer that
Right.
you are, and you've almost the movie Batman. When Heath Ledger played the Joker, is probably the greatest depiction of our kind of personality types, because you get so engulfed in that character that you kind of forget it's a character.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So you get so comfortable being the fixer or the glue
Right.
that you forget at times, man, who's there to fix me?
Right.
Or who's there to glue and hold me together?
Right, right.
And if you're not careful, you will overexert yourself trying to help everyone else and have nothing left for yourself. But the kind of personality types, based on what we've experienced in our lives, has caused us to say, if I'm trying to have someone fix me, that's selfish.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
For
Like,
sure.
if I take time for myself, I'm selfish. It's the time that I'm spending for me, I could be spending helping someone else. And that really comes from the past that really you've kind of suppressed in the back of your subconscious, thinking that it never existed, it never happened until something triggers it.
So something that I struggled with a lot, which I didn't learn about until my later 20s, was attachment. And this is something that a lot of I learned about it more. I think I was listening to something about kids who are adopted,
Right.
who either have a loss of a parent or have a broken home. And I really related to it. As attachment is basically that feeling of human connection, right? And when we have parents who are there and who create a safe environment, we feel a real attachment to them. But when a child is broken away from that, either removed from the home, or maybe the parents aren't suitable, they're into drugs, or they're doing things, that child has a attachment break.
Right.
And what happens is, through their life, if they don't learn how to regain attachment, they forever go and they don't feel attached to things. So how that played out in my life was I would make friends. I would seem like I was best friends with everybody, right? Because I could formulate these really false relationships, which I wanted to have them, but I didn't know how.
Okay.
But if something went wrong, or if I decided I didn't want to be there anymore, I felt zero emotional connection to just get up and leave.
Oh, you could just get up and walk away.
I could just get up and walk away
And have no remorse
and
about
have
it.
no remorse. And it was usually built on some kind of resolve. Like, I sensed they were going to leave me soon, or maybe
That's interesting.
or I got so far deep into it, I realized they're convinced we're best friends. I know everything about them and they don't know a thing about me. And you realize there's nowhere to go from there. Because if you built your entire relationship on something false, there's no next step. And so you back away and you pull away. And so that was something I did a lot. And I think I did it pretty covertly. I don't think there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, Alia. But there were a few people in my life who later came around and were like, hey, what happened? We were all hanging out and you were a part of the group. And then all of a sudden one day you were just gone.
Yeah.
And you never came back. And I didn't feel any emotional attachment to that group because everything that it was built off of was about me serving them, not them knowing who I was and serving me back.
Amen for that. So let me ask you, Alia, like, do you have a friend, and I'm praying you said the right thing so that I don't feel like I'm by myself. Do you have a friend that you can say, I've had a friend since 3 years old?
Right.
You know, have you seen like in those movies where
they
grow up together? Yeah. Do you have that one?
I don't have since I was 3. I would say that's because a lot of my situation of my life has broken me away from people. I do have, so just to give like a really small snapshot of my life, is parents were divorced, my mom remarried, very abusive relationship. That turned into a whole life built off of a lot of pretenses of a false church. It turned into a cult. And so basically I was able to escape at one point when I was in my early 20s, 23. But I had to start life over. So I had to dump everybody who used to know me because they all knew me as the cult leader's daughter. Well, they didn't think it was a cult, but it was. And so I had to, it was a purge. My whole other life went away and I started from beginning. And there were only a couple people who, I can think of like one in particular of a friend who knew me from before and who I continued a relationship after. And so she knows me from where I was then. She knows me who I am now. And I can say she's one of the few people who saw me after and I felt comfortable bringing my real new self to. But I had to relearn because of when you grow up in a cult, you learn to hide everything. Everything's hidden. Everything's seemingly out in the open, but nothing's out in the open.
Right.
Everything is packed away. So that kind of fed a lot into my performance too. Because did you know I used to work at a church?
I remember you
I
told
was
me
a pastor at 20. I was an
you
unofficial
told me pieces of that when we
pastor.
were in school together, and I remember doing what I'm doing right now. Like, oh my God! Like, and I think at that time I never like put it together that it was like a cultish environment.
Yes,
I remember you saying that you needed to kind of escape from it, but I never put. That's why my eyes just got big, which I broke like the cardinal rule of pastoring, which is never act surprised, right? And I'm like, but this is my little sister. You know,
You're not pastor right now. You're just my friend, DJ.
Oh, person, thank you very much. Yeah, so it's, but like the reason why I asked that question is, I don't have that.
Right.
I've never had that. Like
Right.
I've had people who were friends, and I thought were going to last.
Okay.
But it never did, which I think has like led into where I am today, where I do question.
Yeah.
And you ask like the man behind the mask or the actor when he's off stage.
Yeah.
I don't have that. I've never had that.
Right.
I think that's one thing I long for is to have someone that knows me that's not Pastor DJ. I mean, I have my wife, and my wife is, freaking tremendous.
Yeah.
Can I say freaking?
You can say freaking.
Oh, okay, freaking tremendous. You know, I love that woman with all my heart. But to have a man that's your boy, that's your homie, you know, that knew you before you were Pastor Criner.
Right.
That knows you as DJ.
Who's loved you through
it all. Through all the hell, through all the good, the bad.
And that's part of it. So in order for someone to love you through everything, they have to know everything.
Absolutely.
And in our game, information is key.
Well, you can't share everything as well.
You can't share everything. No.
Because you run the risk of destroying your integrity.
Right.
And disappointing individuals that know you only for the person and the title that you have before your first name compared to knowing you as the name before the title.
Yeah.
You know, and that's tough. That's difficult. So if you didn't know me before all this came.
Right.
Then I can't share that with you now that all this is here because you were introduced to me by the title first, not by the name first.
Right.
And I think that's the unfortunate reality of some of us in the lines of work, profession, callings, or whatever you want to call it, is you really don't have anybody that you can be vulnerable with to express the truth. There's a song by Smokey Robinson that's called The Tears of a Clown.
I love that song.
Isn't it crazy? Like, and the words to it is real, like, and the beat is clean. Like, dun, 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 dun. But like the words are crazy. Like the clown's job is to make people laugh.
Yeah.
But who's there for the clown when the clown tears up and has to cry? No, your job is not to cry. That's not why we pay you. That's not why we hired you. That's not why we want you around.
Right.
We don't need your tears. We need you to laugh. Well, who helps the clown?
Right.
Who helps the person get over their tears so that they can make individuals laugh?
Yeah.
There's nobody. We're going to call another clown. Well, that clown only knows you as a clown.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I'm going to go back to feeling attachment is when you don't do it often, when you haven't done it a lot in your life, and then you attempt it. So I realized this probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and I thought, okay, I have to redo the way I do relationships, because it has to be real with someone other than my husband, who I have exposed myself to completely.
Right.
And so about 4 years ago, I decided, like, okay, I'm going to stop with the pleasing. I'm not just going to give people the answers they want. I'm not going to strategize anymore. I'm going to start being real about who I am. I'm going to start sharing information about me, and not in a way that is, because what I can do really well is tell my story with no feelings. I could sit here and tell the shocking story of my cult life and feel nothing, because to me, I'm crafting it. It's true, but I'm crafting it. I'm not being vulnerable. A lot of people, when they share their life, they're like, oh, it was so hard to talk about. I'm like, it's not hard for me to talk about hardly anything. Right. Because I know how to talk about my life with no exposure. Right. So then there's other areas that you have to learn. What are the exposure areas of my life? I decided I'm going to go back and I'm going to start living relationships with exposure areas. And I'm going to start exposing. So I picked like just a couple people to do that with. And it took years to get me to talk about my feelings. What I always say is talk about my feelings in the now. So I can say, yeah, I had a bad week last week. It was rough. But what I can do with it is I can craft it where something bad happened. I had a bad emotion, but then I came out on the other side okay. So it's a victory story. Victory stories are fun to tell because you always look and feel really good. Right. The hardest story to tell is I'm at the bottom right now. Right. I need help. I'm at the bottom. I don't know what to do. I need somebody. And then give over your complete trust to somebody to come and be there for you. Right? Right? Are you tracking with me? Not you? No. So when you're in a place where you're in trouble, besides your wife, do you have people you can call? I'm talking about you're in trouble and you come 100% hand over control to someone else. No. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you something. That is not because people are not trustworthy. That's on your end, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that is a personal.
But it's
growth.
also because of the past experiences of lending a hand or asking for a hand to help you. Yeah. And there is motives behind why they reach out a hand to help you. Right. I don't need a person to, and you said be real. Yeah. I don't need a person to reach out a hand so they can put it on Facebook that they were there helping, or they took a picture next to Pastor Criner. I'm not asking for your help as Pastor Criner. Right. I'm asking for your help as DJ Criner. Right. And if you can't do it with the authenticity of being a friend or a brother, or I don't care if you call it just helping the dog out, then I'm good. Because at that particular moment, I don't need you to use my moment of weakness as a means of hyping yourself up. Yeah. And you have to be, in my field of work, calling, or whatever individuals want to call it, it's very, very scary. Yeah. Because there are people that have profited off of my weakness. Yeah. And I've had to play cleanup work. Yeah. Because of my moments of weakness. And that moments of weakness could be when one of my good friends passed away last year, one who I actually can say was a good friend. Yeah. And that's kind of that area of vulnerability that I'm talking about now that I probably would never talk about if there probably was, a big setup that was, because that's a very vulnerable subject for me. It's whenever I feel like maybe I have found somebody. Yeah. Maybe I have found a person who I can be vulnerable with. Either they are taken away from me by God Almighty, which He passed away, suddenly. Wow. 1 minute He's here, next minute He's not. And then fully healthy, was at my house the night before. His wife and my wife are tight. His kid and my kids are aces. They're tight. I'm the kid's godfather, and then all of a sudden, the next day, I'm the last one to talk to him on the phone while the paramedics are there. And I'm like, I'll meet you at the hospital. And then 15 minutes later, he dies of a massive heart attack at 37 years old. You know? And then it's like, okay, God, maybe I'm not supposed to have somebody I'm close to. And it's almost to that point where it's like, okay, just accept it. Is that reality? Probably not. Is that a sense of me saying it's best for me to stay away from people and not get really, really close? Yeah. to protect myself compared to getting close and then being heartbroken, either by a person disappointing me, or, and I know this sounds bad coming from a pastor, or God disappointing me.
Yeah.
Right? By taking Mufasa away from Simba. You know what I'm saying? Like, and when you're vulnerable with someone and you share moments of weakness with that person, you almost walk away praying to God that you keep that area of weakness privately and don't use it at your leisure to get me to do stuff you want me to do or to profit off of that.
Right.
And in this area, and I'm not the only person. I mean, I've talked to plenty of quote unquote leaders, who are like, nah, I can't share with everybody what I deal with.
Right.
And you would love to have one person that you can open up in just certain areas, whether it's an area that happened as a kid, or area that happened in your marriage, or area that happened with your ministry or your job. But for me, I can give you great advice on having an accountability partner or having somebody that you trust. But if that question is asked back to me, my response is, unfortunately, I haven't found that person yet.
Yeah. Am
I praying that person can come? I think that prayer is becoming less and less of a reality of a prayer for me. It's almost like I'll find that person when I close my eyes and wake up and see him.
Yeah.
Because it's hard.
Yeah. I am going to challenge the idea that it's not just because of who you are. Mm-hmm. It's not just because of what you do. Mm-hmm. I challenge the idea that many more people, a lot of people out there feel very similar.
Absolutely.
To that, and have done the same thing as you, like I said, in a very different vicinity of, like myself. I'm not a predominant pastor anymore.
But you were like,
I was for a while. My husband met me when I was, right, babe? He's in the room. He met me when I was the shiz, when I was somebody. And it's funny, people still run into me on the street from my old life, as I call it. A lot of people have like their old life where they're like, I used to party and drink. No, I had an old life where I was a prophetic pastor at 20 years old, leading a women's ministry, counseling women twice my age on sexual issues, and I never even kissed a boy. And I was doing these things that are shocking, because it's all under the umbrella of like spiritual abuse and misuse of power. But I was doing these things with absolutely no training, all that. Okay, so I'm not that person anymore. And people who meet me, most of them have no idea where I've come from. And it's not that I think I purposely hide it. It's that I don't expose that part of me to an individual until I feel they're ready to know it about me. It's kind of a layout that I do. So for me, I still experience the same thing you're talking about. I'm going to say I had my first exposure story where I purposely exposed myself. I'm going to tell a little story. So right now I'm pregnant. I'm like a little over 7 months pregnant. Right before this pregnancy, I thought I was pregnant back in August, and I wasn't, but I thought I was. So I decided, third kid, I'm just going to tell people what I started calling people. That was really bad. I got a few positive pregnancy tests, and then a week later I got 3 negative tests. So my insurance wasn't up yet, so I went to a free clinic, and they told me you had a miscarriage, super early miscarriage. I was devastated. My husband, he's 1 of 13. I feel like I just my uterus let him down. I was devastated. So now I have to go back. And this is an exposure thing for me. Not only I got to tell people good news, now I have to go and tell people really bad, sad news about my life. And I chose one friend, my friend Whitney, who I did this podcast with before. And I told her, and she texted me back, I'm leaving work right now and I'm coming to you.
Beautiful, right?
Okay, that makes me want to cry, right? And normally I would say no, because nobody needs to be there for me. No one needs to show up when I'm scared. That's not something I need in my head. But I said yes, which was like a really vulnerable thing for me to do. She came over to my house, and she literally we did this thing called cocooning, which is where we put a heavy blanket over ourselves. We cocooned and we just talked, and I cried. I talked about what I was feeling. We laughed. She sat with me for like 4 or 5 hours. And I think that was the first time that I told somebody I had an emergency and they came for me. I'm talking about a friend, not like someone who I consider family. But they came for me and they sat with me in what I was going through.
Did she tell anybody afterwards?
No, it wasn't something we really talked about to anyone else.
See,
that was a real true friend moment. But
I long for that.
That was really hard to do.
I long for that.
Yeah, because it was probably one of the hardest things to do. It was harder for me to say yes to help than it was to think I went through a miscarriage. Okay, end of story. I didn't have a miscarriage. I actually had a kidney infection that sparked a positive test. And then when the kidney infection cleared up, it went negative. So I never had a miscarriage. So I never did.
But so the clinic said you had a miscarriage.
They didn't check me. It was too early. They thought I had a miscarriage based on what I told them. That's pretty crazy, right? Great, and then come later, I didn't even know that till a month later when I was still having problems. And I couldn't figure out why I was still feeling so ill. And I told my new doctor I had a miscarriage. I had a miscarriage, but I still don't feel good. She said, okay, well, first things first, let's run a blood test on you. She ran a blood test on me, called me in 2 hours, and said, your HCG levels are really high. If you had a miscarriage and your levels are that high, that means you have a tumor in your uterus, possibly. You're going to get an ultrasound right now. So I'm going to the hospital thinking that I have cancer, right? And so I'm sitting there for 45 minutes while they're looking at my uterus. I'm thinking, they're going to tell me I have cancer. This is it for me. And the lady turns to me and goes, do you want to know what's going on? And I'm like, yes. She turns the screen and she's like, you're 7 weeks pregnant. I'm like, what?
That's kind of cool.
No, you don't understand. I had a miscarriage. She's like, you never had a miscarriage. So the whole kidney infection thing, I didn't know that till 2 months later, that's what sparked my positive test.
Now, where was your friend throughout that entire process there?
Oh, I was texting her on the way in and texting her.
How did it feel to have that?
It was.
I know you have boss, and I know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I want to say this. It feels great, but it's still really scary.
Yeah, I know.
And the first time me and my friend Whitney, we had like a conflict. It was 100 times scarier having already been vulnerable than having a conflict, because now I felt something for it. Now it was hard because I had so much emotion invested, and I had never done that before outside of my husband. I'd never invested that much emotion. So there's a really great side where you're like, this is awesome. I feel great. I have someone in my life who I trust, who knows me, and who I can give myself to, again, outside of people I consider as close as family. But then you have any kind of discord, and it is so much harder. And walking through discord with that person and getting through it on my end was torture, because I'd never exposed that much in myself. And I went through feelings and emotions that I had not gone through in years because how scary it was. And granted, everything, turns out good and you have resolution and it's great. But I'm saying it is a muscle that you build. Mm-hmm. And it starts with exposing yourself to somebody and allowing them to be there for you. And it starts with testing out the waters of it. And then you build that muscle. Because of what I've been through with my friend Whitney, because of the podcast we did together, because of, having to tell each other hard news, having to be so real with each other. Her and I have this pact of realness with each other. We have to be real. Because of that, it doesn't mean our relationship is all perfect and joyful. Mm-hmm. It means that when we go through stuff, we work through it and it hurts real. Yeah. It's not like I can just say, yeah, okay, I'm just going to say the right things. I know the right things to say. Now I have all these feelings involved. I have this vulnerability involved. But coming out of it and going on the other side, I know now that I've built that trust with somebody, and now I can do it with somebody else. Right. I can test it on someone else. Right. So, so let's go back really quick. So I want to do this.
I'm listening to it. I'm like, this sounds so amazing. I'm living in the euphoria of your friendship.
This only happened in 6 months. But this is
6 months.
Yeah, but no. Let's go back really quick because I want to travel back. Okay. Let's go back to growing up. Okay. When do you remember? And I think you'll know, making the decision that you don't need people. That you can do this on you can take care of yourself?
I was 13 years old.
Okay.
My father and my mother were separated. Well, they were divorced at this time. And my father, as a correctional officer, needed to be at work at 6 o'clock in the morning. He said 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock in the morning. And I had my baby sister, Dominique. I think Dominique at the time was like in the 3rd grade. I was in the 9th grade. No. Yeah, I was in the 9th grade.
Yeah.
And I remember where we stayed at, when my father stayed. 1 week we were with my father, the other week we was with my mother, which was torture for a kid.
Yeah.
And they didn't have the best relationship. Oh my God, I hated that crap. Like, because my mother's house was more like the house of peace, in our opinion. And we had moved into my grandma's house with my mom, and it was like a peace house. But my father's house was like this argumentative. The tension was so thick, it wasn't even funny. Pops was never there. He's with his girlfriend who was going to be his wife. She was a straight butthole to us because she couldn't stand my mom. Oh my God, it was just insane. And I remember my father one morning telling us that I needed to take care of my sister and walk to the bus stop. That would have been cool if the bus stop wasn't 3 miles away.
Oh my gosh.
And it was 6 a.m. and it was pouring down raining outside.
Yeah.
And at that point I decided, okay, I don't need you no more. Like, you are my superhero. My father was everything to me. Like, this is the man I wanted to be like. I can't believe I'm telling you this. My father was like the dude that I wanted to be. He was a preacher, then he stopped preaching. Correctional officer, big buff dude, handsome guy, charismatic, funny. That everybody says I act just like him, like my mannerisms. Right? He was the one that all the kids wanted to be around. He would draw on the boards, right? And everybody was like, "Your dad is so cool, man." And I remember growing up, I was like, my daddy is the best. And then this change started happening where he started becoming more of a warden like the prison system was.
Yeah.
And so he was like, walk your sister to the bus stop. And I'm like, we have to be at the bus stop, Dad, at like 7:20 in the morning.
Yeah.
How long is it going to take? And I remember him telling, well, I drove this route. You need to leave the house by 6 in the morning to get to the bus stop by 7:20. And literally, it took almost 2 hours to walk to the bus stop.
Yeah.
And I'm in the 9th, my sister's in the 3rd grade. And I remember walking to the bus stop and my baby sister crying. And I'm grabbing her. And then when it started coming down too heavy, and it's dark outside. It's 6
early morning, yeah.
I remember hiding, like going and hiding in like this, almost like the shed where this car was at, and just holding my baby sister. And like, it's going to be good. It's going to be okay, baby. Like, I remember calling her baby. And that's why we're like the thickest of thieves to this day.
Yeah.
And getting to where the bus stop was early that first morning, like I made it to the bus stop and I didn't need my dad, right?
Yeah.
We made it. And sitting on the curb and wrapping my arm around my sister to shelter her from the rain. And I was in the 9th grade.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there praying to God, like, Lord, I don't want this to be like this, God. And we had to do that for the next 3 days. And on the 3rd day, I'll never forget, while we're sitting on the curb, a garage door opening behind us. And there was a guy named Ted Jones, this black dude who lived across the street from the old house we used to live in. Mind you, it was the neighborhood that we moved from when my mom and my dad divorced.
Yeah.
And I remember him coming out to smoke a cigarette with coffee in his hand. And he's like, hey, kids, why are you sitting on my front lawn? We're sitting on the curb because it's raining still.
Yeah.
And him saying, David, little David, what are you doing over here? I'm like, oh, I'm waiting on the bus because I didn't want to rat my dad out, right? And he come in the house. And I'll never forget going into his house. It was so warm in there. Him, Miss Jones was up. She was cooking breakfast for their kids. And I remember him turning the TV on, letting us sit on the couch, and her bringing us like the breakfast, bacon, eggs, biscuits. And I'll never forget, every time he turned the TV on, it was SportsCenter. And it was that dun 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 dun. And I remember holding Dominique like, we're going to be all right, Nikki. We good. Every morning we know where to come.
Yeah.
Somebody is there. And that's when I said, I'm the man.
Yeah.
I got my family. I have my kids. I'm going to have my kids. I'm going to take care of my sister.
Yeah.
They're not going to need anything. And at that moment, I was like, I don't care if my pops, if the church, and if men do not want to take care of us. This is my job. I'm going to fix everything. I'm going to take care of everybody. And at 13 years old, I made that decision that I'm going to take care of my mom, my grandma, and my sister. And I've never let them down. And I will go broke making sure that my family is okay. And I think it kind of established like this area of Superman.
Yeah.
Like fix it, turn it on.
Yeah.
Like bump being tired, bump being hungry, find a way, fix the problem, take care of people so that they don't have to worry. You worry, but they don't need to worry, and put a smile on your face. And to this day, I have never cried in front of my sister, Dominique.
Wow.
I have never cried in front of my mom. Nah. My wife has seen me cry, but she saw me crying because she was being nosy. You know, like there's a problem, I got it, I'm gonna fix it.
Yeah.
And at that moment, it was like, nope, be careful trusting people because people will say they're there.
Yeah.
And they may let you down. But never hold a grudge against those people because people are just being people.
Right.
So I can get hurt by somebody to this day and I'll be cool with you the next minute. I'm straight. You'll never know that I'm cutting you off.
Right.
Because I don't believe in, holding a grudge against people. It ain't Christian life, but also it's just not the way I am. I just got to fix the problem.
Yeah.
So I'm 13 until now.
And isn't it funny? I knew you would know the moment.
Yeah.
Because everybody who's been through what you've been through knows the moment they decided they didn't need anybody.
Absolutely.
I remember the moment when I decided I didn't need anybody. And I remember carrying that through the years of like, I cannot rely on anybody because the people I'm supposed to rely on aren't taking care of me.
Right.
I grew up in a very abusive home. When you grow up in an abusive home, the people who are supposed to keep you safe end up being the people you look back and say, wow, they literally held me in front of the abuser and said, take this because my mom used to say to me when my stepdad would abuse us, I'm so glad you're here with me. I don't want to have to do this alone. And that's my mother, who I love, and she's passed away now. And she was the closest person I had until I left the church, until I left the cult. And for my whole life, I was so close to her. But so much of our relationship got intermeshed in being in abuse together and her not being a mother. We actually had, when I was about 12, we had what I called a role reversal, where I started to act like a mother. And I started to say, okay, Mom, that's not how you talk to people. I used to correct her in public. Yeah. And she was okay with it because she experienced, unfortunately, abuse in her life way before that kept her very much a child emotionally. Right. She never grew up. And people who know her to this day say, your mom was one of the kindest, sweetest, most giving person, but she kind of seemed like she was 13. Wow. A lot of people who knew her deeply knew that she never really aged emotionally past a certain point. So now she's raising a child, I have a brother too, but he was out of the home by the time I was 12. He was with my biological father out of town. So now I'm being raised by a child. Well, I realize I'm being raised by a child. We're in an abusive relationship. I have to be the adult. I have to be the protector. I've got to hold this together. I've got to come in between my mom and my stepdad to make sure nobody gets hurt. I also learned that if you can be the one making the biggest flash, like, look at me, look how good I am. That was my thing. Look how good I am. We don't have to focus on the bad of your guys' fighting because look how good I'm being. Mm-hmm. And so I would take all of the attention, because I like attention. But it started with, I love attention. But it started, unfortunately, it started as a way to deflect abuse. Yeah. And so I learned how to use my, who I was, my persona, my identity, my actions to basically keep everything safe. Right. Everything was built around safety for me. Right. Now, okay, so then we're here, right? We realize all these things. I don't want to end here because that's not what this is about. So where do we go from there? So I'm going to just tell you real quick. So in my life, what changed everything was a family that came in for me. So when I was 23, I left the cult. I essentially was homeless. I had nowhere to go. And so there was a family called the Burkle family. Anyone who knows me know my Burkle family.
You told me about that.
You know my Burkle family.
Right.
They took me in. And I'm talking about took me in and basically said you have a home here indefinitely. I lived there for 4 years. And somehow they for me undid the damage of basically most of my abuse in my life and taught me what it was like to live in a loving home with loving people who are really there for you. I mean, really there for you. I'm talking about lay down everything they have going on. You're breaking down in the next room and they bust the door down coming in to hold you, just to be there for you. Talk through every problem of your life, be there for you. So the Burkles are
superheroes to me. I mean, now we're all grown up, and they had 4 kids who were in teenage years at the time, and I was 23. So I was like the oldest, but the youngest, because I was so emotionally broken when I started at their home. And they basically like parented me, and then the kids were just like my siblings all of a sudden, and they enveloped me in their life. And to this day, guess where I am Christmas morning? Guess where I am Thanksgiving? Guess where I go when I have an emergency? Guess who I depend on? It's my Burkle family. And I lived there for 4 years, and it took me 4 years to trust them. Like, really trust them. And I would say even to this day, we've known each other now for like 10 years. And I say to this day, I still get nervous about talking to them. And it's not because of them. It's because I still work through that idea of attachment. And I've finally, I would say this last couple of years, have realized that after being there for me through everything, I finally figured out that they're not going anywhere. It took about 8 years for me to figure it out. But realizing like, oh, these people are in it for good, and they didn't just invite me to everything and basically get me through every hard thing in my life for the last 10 years for nothing.
They actually love
They actually love me, and they're here to stay.
And they don't want anything in return.
No, my Burkle mom, Kathleen, she constantly is trying to convince me to move onto her property. She just wants me near. And she's like, my mom passed away, and she's my mom now. And she's been my mom. She was my mom even when my mom was still here. And she's always been there for me as a mother. And now as I've gotten older, we're like good friends. So again, how do you correct it? Well, my situation was a little special because I got to be enveloped by correction. Mm-hmm. I got to be enveloped by people who basically spent their lives proving to me that they weren't going anywhere.
Right.
And it took a long time to get there.
Right.
But I think that the process was one of the most valuable things I ever went through in my life. Mm-hmm. Because people meet me now, and you would never know that I grew up on like a super broken home, super broken, that I basically, if I told you like details of what I went through, you would think you would be crazy. Mm-hmm. People who heard like my real story would tell me, like, I had therapists tell me, like, it doesn't make sense why you haven't ended up in a mental institution, some of the things you've been through. And something that I've always been so proud of is that people meet me and they hear my story finally and they realize it's seamless. There's so little of the past that rules me today, but a lot of it has to do with that middle part, right. My Burkle part, and God using that part of my life and that love and that acceptance and just that complete envelopment, to get me through. Now, I could have not taken it. Mm-hmm. I could have run away from them. I actually moved out once and tried to do it on my own. It didn't work. I came back in like a week. But I think the thing was I was finally ready in my life to give it over.
Right.
I was finally ready. And I think how we work on things is that when things come up in our life, we have the choice to work on it or to run from it.
Right.
We have the choice to say, I'm realizing there's a big thing right here in front of me, and I am deathly afraid to walk it. But I don't want to run anymore. I don't want to deny it anymore. And when we walk it, bringing like faith into it, I think that's when God partners with us and is like, all right, let's walk it together.
But I also think God kind of knows, what it's going to take.
Yeah.
So I don't have a best friend.
Right.
I have family.
Yeah.
So the interesting journey that I went through, since you talking about I ended it on a bad note, ended it on a
yes.
The interesting
part
talk
about your dad a little bit too, because I know that's
it's big. It's like it's the definition of reconciliation.
Yeah.
So my father and I went through like years of turmoil. I mean, straight hell. Especially when I graduated from high school and I started playing at the state and went to Fresno State. But my father moved to Hanford, and he said for a job transfer. But I'm like, you want to get close to your son, because we didn't have a great relationship my high school years at all. And so he's in Hanford working at Pleasant Valley Prison. And we're not talking to each other. We're not seeing each other at all. As a matter of fact, we got to a point where there was a restraining order put against me.
Wow.
We got into a couple of fist fights, and I don't know what I was thinking, because he's like this black belt, and correctional officer. But he never physically, punch me or anything like that. It was more just like wrestling to kind of put me to the ground.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking he's the worst guy in the world. And then I remember at the age of 20 years old, my father contracting valley fever from working in the prison system, and they thought he was going to die.
Wow.
And I remember going to his bedside at the hospital, and my dad, in a very faint, whispering voice, he had lost so much weight, my father saying, son, I love you, and I'm sorry. And he said, but you can't preach about a God that forgives and you haven't forgiven. And that's not what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to hear him just confess to putting me through years of hell. And I thought about what he was saying. And I mind you, I was living a crazy life. I mean, I was drinking, I was smoking, I was sleeping around. I guess I was trying to hide my feelings of pain behind a bottle and behind partying, you know, because I didn't have connection. So I was like, well, I hated going out to clubs and parties unless I had something in my system to drink with, right?
Right.
I hated it. And I hated going home by myself if I was drunk. But if I wasn't, I loved being by myself. It's that image of being a performer in public, an extrovert. But when I'm home, I'm an introvert. I don't want people at my house. I want to be by myself. I need that moment of peace, right?
Yep.
And so when my father almost passed away and God saved him, we started these years of reconciliation. And it started really at about 21, 22 years old. And for 5 years, we went through these slow steps of true reconciliation where we never talked about the past. And every time he tried to bring it up, I'm like, I don't want to talk about it, you know. Forgiveness that Christ gave to me on the cross, that he didn't bring up my past. He just loved me for my future. And I wanted to see if there's a future as father and son. And it started with me, not with him.
Wow.
Because he was, even though he was the offender in my eyes, I was offending him by holding on to a grudge that he could do nothing about.
Right.
You know, I mean, God gave me a dad. For 11 years of my life, he was the greatest dad in the world. And then for a few years, that wasn't even 11 years, the amount he was so good, my father had this moment where he was just a true butthole.
Yeah.
Am I going to hold a grudge against the fact that he was a butthole for those moments? Or am I going to celebrate the fact that I had a father that didn't convince my mother to abort me?
Yeah.
A father that put a roof over my head, that paid the PG&E bill, that treated me like a son, but then had a slip-up moment.
Yeah.
Did I ever have those slip-up moments in life where God saw me for those slip-ups, or did he see me for the moments that I was good to him?
Yeah.
And I had to let go and forgive. And it was hard. It was true hell hard. But what helped change me was I met a family that I'm really close to even to this day. They're my godparents.
Yeah.
And the crazy part about it is my god sister is my secretary here at the church.
Yeah.
Right? And it's the Johnson family, man. And I looked at them as the Cosbys. Before all the incidents that Bill did. It was the Huxtables.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It was him as the man, and the woman was my godmama Lita. They had four beautiful kids, you know, who were my age. And I finally had people that were my age. They're goofy. They're cooking dinner together. They're watching TV. He's coming out with a house coat on. And I'm like, who wears a robe in the house that's black? Like, we don't do that stuff. They had actual silk pajamas that they wore. And I'm like, that's the kind of family I want.
Yeah.
So I started looking at him as my dad.
Yeah.
And her as my mom. And Shanae as my older sister. Because me and my older sister didn't have the best relationship at the time. And I saw what God was doing.
Yeah.
He was like, I am starting you from 12 years old up.
Yeah.
So whenever I'm hungry, hey, we're having dinner, come over.
Yep.
So I'm coming over and they're doing like spaghetti casserole, right? And my plate is right there ready. DJ, you know, Christmas, we have your gift. No, I'm going to go to Stockton. No, you're not. You're going to come over and pick up your gift before you go home.
Yeah.
Before you go back to Stockton.
Yep.
Right? And even to this day, my godmom is the greatest, you know? She never replaced my mom because my mom and me are still close. But for that moment, I needed a surrogate mom and dad in Fresno. And they became that surrogate family. And my godfather taught me what it means to love my dad again.
Wow.
And he kept pushing me. He's the one that reminded me of what it meant to be a husband to my wife.
Yeah.
It was him. And then when the reconciliation happened with me and my daddy, it was absolutely awesome. My dad reconfessed his life to Christ. He joined the church. He's now the men's pastor of our church.
Yeah, I remember that.
And he's able to teach men on what it means to be divorced and what it means to be a good man how not to get a divorce, the mistakes that you need to make sure you don't make. And me and my father are the closest now than we've ever been. And if I was to say I had a best friend, it's my daddy.
Yeah.
So I don't have a best friend that's my age.
Right.
Do I long for that? Yeah, I want a man that's like my age that we can kick it, talk to.
Yeah.
But all I got to do is drive to Hanford and chill with my dad.
Yeah.
And we're like aces. Like, we are the closest. Nobody, how you talk about nobody knows?
Yeah.
No one, unless they hear this, will know that at one point you would have thought we would have killed each other.
Yeah.
Because we're so close. He was the best man at my wedding. He stood by my side, you know. Yeah, my father is everything to me. God like really reconciled that, and I think that's the reason why I'm able to lead and pastor or serve the way that I am, is because I have no ill feelings towards anybody. Because I can say, if I can forgive my dad, and my dad can forgive me, then there's nobody in this world that can treat me wrong that I can't forgive.
Yeah.
Even though I may not have somebody that I'm close to, my father and me as an example of what reconciliation looks like when you take off the mask.
Yeah. And
you show who you really are.
Yeah.
So I think that's a happy note.
Well, I appreciate you being so vulnerable today.
Thank you.
And sharing everything. I think that part of what I want to do this, why I want to do this topic is because I think that there are so many people out there who feel a sense of loneliness amongst so many people because they don't know how to share who they really are.
Yeah, I agree, sis.
And you just talked about a bunch of things that, probably 90% of people don't know anything about, and who see you every week.
Right.
Who are around you all the time.
Right.
And you truly exposed in a way that was vulnerable, and you shared a part of yourself, and that's hard to do.
Yeah.
But
I think it's when you look at people that you trust. I think, and I know this is not like an inspirational deal. I know but I will say, God is, in my opinion, I think God really gave you a gift, because for you to get me to break rules is very, very difficult to do, especially when you have a microphone that's recording everything I'm saying.
Right, and we're gonna put it out to all
your
followers.
It's gonna go viral. He's not who you thought he was.
That's the title of this episode.
Yeah, I know. DJ Criner, the truth.
Well, you inspired this because when you told me a couple of years ago that, I don't know if you remember saying this to me, you said you're one of the few people who really I feel like I can be myself with. I'm like,
you're my little sister.
Me? Like, what have I done that you can, but that was such an impactful moment for me because it, with all of my issues with letting people in, I felt very real with you.
Very.
I never felt like I had any pretense. I don't feel like I was acting or performing. I just feel like we genuinely connected.
People hated it too.
And people hated it because
why are you and her so close?
And we were obnoxious about it. So, you look at that and you ask the question, why? Why did it work so well?
Right.
And I think we related in the way we relate to others.
Kindred spirits.
There was a kindred spirits about
Absolutely.
it. And when I realized that we were so similar, and I realized you were there was this day we were in class and there was conflict. I think it was about conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And there was conflict in the room. And I was watching myself because I come from abuse. I watch for conflict and then I try to intercede. Mm-hmm. And I look next to me and you're doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm like,
I remember that, sis.
He's tracking the room. He knows where every person in the room is doing, what their interactions are like. He knows when he needs to step in. He's tracking the group talk. He's making sure nobody gets hurt. He's protecting people. Yeah. And I realized DJ and we do the same thing.
Yeah, we do.
And I always wanted to know why you did the same thing I did and what your story was and how you came to be where you are.
Because you never want someone to go through what you went through. And you never know the moment that they're going through it. And even what's going on in this world today. Like, you never know the smallest gesture of love or the smallest gesture of just being there can cause someone never to have the kind of story you had because they may not be able to bounce out the way you did, Like, you have this gift, Alia, get people to feel better just by your smile, or just by that goofy laugh you have, or just by the ability to always make people feel like they're welcome and that they belong.
Thank you.
And you never know that if there is someone that's there who is masking a smile, and behind that smile there are pills. There's a gun that they want to shoot themselves with. There's a knife that they want to slit their wrist with. And you opening your mouth saying, "Hi, I'm Alia. What's your name?" We really don't understand how someone seeing us and then recognizing that they see us can cause a person who doesn't feel like they matter or don't feel like they belong to say, "Let me drop this bottle of pills so that I can turn to you and answer your question."
Yeah.
"Hi, my name is DJ Criner." And you never knew that moment walking into that classroom, I felt like I was by myself.
Yeah. Oh, no, I would have never guessed someone like you.
No.
With it, more so because your personality.
Right, exactly.
That you ever felt coming intimidated.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't look physically, you look more intimidating than you would ever look unintimidated. But no, you're so right. And I think that, that's the part of our faith walk, is that God uses what was meant for bad and uses it to help others.
Absolutely.
I think the other side is everything we're talking about today is he did call us that, but he also called us to connect with our brothers and sisters, and he does find those kindred relationships, and I think he challenges us. And that's my challenge for everyone listening. My challenge is, if you relate to this, if you relate to these stories, if you relate to the type of person you are and how you care for others so much, first question, go back and figure out when it started.
Absolutely.
Because that is such a key point in your life.
That was a trigger.
And that story you told is the trigger that holds the power of it over your life.
Right.
And then come full forwards and ask yourself, what do I need to do to start walking the path to letting and allowing people to be known by others?
Absolutely.
And incidentally, your first one is doing this podcast. You probably didn't know how deep it was going to get, but doing this podcast is step
simple.
One.
Like, "Hey, DJ, do you think the 49ers are going to win the Super Bowl?" That's what I thought it was going to be. We didn't even talk about the Niners.
I don't watch sports, so I couldn't ask you questions. I'm sorry.
I appreciate that.
But
I talked to boss about that.
He does also not watch sports, so you cannot talk to my husband either.
Okay.
He knows less than I do. He doesn't even
know the rules. Okay. Kindred spirits, huh? No.
Anyways, I want to thank you for coming on today.
Oh, thanks, sis.
So much. And just thank you for being my friend all these years and being someone that I can look to just be myself.
Oh,
and
sis, thank you, man.
I love that about you. So
I love you, sis, just for being you. It means a lot to have somebody this long that never change.
No, I probably won't.
You bet not.
I probably won't. I'm pretty stubborn.
Yeah, if you do, then you won't be the little Greek with the big voice or big mouth.
Big mouth. Don't rename my podcast.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I'll be the big black guy with the little mouth.
There you go.
Yeah, all right.
Impossible. All right. Well, I love you, brother.
Love you too, sis.
Have a good one.
All right.
Bye. This has been a production of Big Talk Little Greek podcast. I want to thank DJ Criner for sitting down with me and giving me an amazing look into his life. Our intro stories in order were provided by Suzanne Knopf-Flood, Valerie Cervantes, Ashley Truman, Nabeel Kanab, and my very own boss Bogdanoff. You can find and share episodes of Big Talk Little Greek on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and iTunes. Please visit and like my Facebook page, Big Talk Little Greek, and follow me on Instagram at Big Talk Little Greek. Yasu!